I couldn't imagine living my life on addictive medications with Harrington rods from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. It was a full, because six compression fractures is a lot. So I had bone fragments on the cord, and I had the neural arch broken, so I was in a lot of trouble. So I figured I might as well see if my mind can influence my body. And it worked. It really worked for me. And when you go through that kind of initiation, you can't go back to business as usual. And it was a dark night of the soul for me during that time because I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. Because I think when you're faced with crisis like that, we always focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. So turning that battleship around for me as a 24-year-old kid was an enormous effort because I couldn't keep my mind on the task. So when I finally was able to get back on my feet and return back to my life, I wanted to see if my mind could influence my body. And I decided two things. I thought, God, there's an innate intelligence within us that's giving us life. It's keeping our heart beating, digesting our food, all the way down to the cellular level, organizing trillions of functions in a cell every second, correcting for mutations in the DNA. So I had a respect for that innate intelligence. And I thought, well, it can heal to a certain point. Yeah, with 6 compression fractures, I thought, this has got to be next level now. This has got to be next level. This. So I had to weigh what I knew against what I didn't know. Well, and so for me, I thought, God, if I could make contact with this intelligence and give it a plan, give it a directive, give it some orders, give it a template, and if I could do it really well, once I've had that vision in my mind super clear, I know that I can't heal it. I'm going to surrender that vision to a greater mind and see if it could begin to work with me. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to influence it and see if I could take it to the next level. Because I knew that, the compression fractures could heal, but I would lose bone height. I still have fragments on my cord. I had motor function problems. I had sensory function problems. I had an enormous amount of pain. So this was kind of next level for me. And I think anytime you go against convention, whether it's social convention, scientific convention, religious convention, anytime you go against the current belief systems, you're always considered foolhardy or insane, right? I mean, you're nuts. The 4 opinions I had from 4 surgeons, they all thought I hit my head. Like they were like, what are you thinking here? Yeah. You just didn't do that. And I just figured, God, if I have the Harrington rod surgery, I'm not going to be the same guy. I won't be able to do anything like I was doing. And so I was willing to trust in that process. I figured if it didn't work, I'm going to wind up with surgery anyway, so I might as well roll the dice. And so number 1 was make contact with that intelligence. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm laying face down. And the second thing was I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness unnoticed by me. So mystical means unknown. That's what the word means. So I was willing to trust if this could work. Now, a little background. I had studied hypnosis a lot. I saw the power of the subconscious mind. I saw, amazing things. And then I did have this kind of crazy moment where I was leaving for graduate school and my best friend's father gave me a book, Autobiography of a Yogi, and I was reading this book and I was like, God, if that is actually the truth, then I'm unaware of a lot. Yeah. And I read that book and scrutinized it and threw it across the room and wrestled with it. But I had this kind of idea that I was willing to take that risk because I had the time. I went from 100 miles an hour in my life to laying face down. So I knew enough about the spine, I knew enough about the body, and the first 6.5 weeks was misery. It was really, really a dark night of the soul because I could not. I was wrestling with my own belief, and my own self-doubt, and my inability to be able to control my mind when you're out of balance. So the first 6.5 weeks, it took me 3 hours to go through that inward process, and then when I was done, I wasn't satisfied. But after that 6.5 weeks, what took me 3 hours, 3.5, sometimes 4 hours to do, because it's the moment I started thinking, should I sell my practice? Should I sell my home? I'm going to be living in a wheelchair. You know, the moment I was, my mind left the present moment, and I went off task. I start all over again. I'd start over, so it was a very, very deliberate but very, very difficult process, because if you get frustrated, it's going to get worse. So I had to move through all this muck.
Yeah.
You know, and 6.5 weeks, all of a sudden something clicked. It was like I hit a golf ball right in the sweet spot. I hit a tennis ball just right. Something clicked for me, and then all of a sudden from that point forward, it got easier. And what took me 3.5 hours, 3 hours to do, I was doing in much less time. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was really mastering the ability to pay attention and to be present. Because every time you catch yourself defaulting and you're going unconscious, the only way you become conscious is you catch yourself going unconscious. And most people say, well, I can't do it. And I was doing that, but really that's a victory.
Yeah,
because that's the only way
Yes.
that you're actually going to stop yourself from going unconscious. So I was pruning connections, and I was rewiring new connections, and I started developing kind of a new mind. And at that moment, Michael, I noticed like the dramatic reduction in my pain. And I was getting sensory feeling back and motor and then my toes, and I was just like, okay, whatever you're doing is working, so keep doing it. And your belief at that point goes from here to here, right? It just catapults because you're seeing the effect of you at cause, right? So for me, I was back on my feet in 10.5 weeks. They wanted to put me in this huge body cast. I was better, I was done. So I couldn't go back to business as usual because I was initiated. I have a very scientific mind, so I just kind of sold everything and left and went to the Northwest and started over again. And I wanted to take some time for myself and ask the big questions. If that truly happened, how did that happen? And is there anybody else has that happened to anybody else? So I had to start studying epigenetics and neuroplasticity and psychoneuroimmunology and electromagnetism, quantum physics, and it just was this kind of exploration for me. And I started getting closer to the understanding. And then when I started interviewing people that had spontaneous remissions from diseases that were treating conventionally or unconventionally, staying the same, and all of a sudden got better. Once I studied and found the commonalities amongst these people, and it was really about the mind. It was really about breaking the habit of being themselves, their old self, and reinventing a new self. The other thing was that they, in their inward process of really deciding who they no longer wanted to be, like if I really could live my life again, and live again, how would I live differently? Do I really want to be an attorney? I hate my job. I don't want to be an attorney, I want to be an artist, right? So you see these people make the transition by choice to stop being one person and start being another person. And in their inward process of thinking about how they do want to think, how they do want to act, how they do want to feel in their new life, they had long moments where they lost track of space and time. Their inward experience became more real than their outer experience. And it caused me to spend a lot of time studying the frontal lobe, which is kind of the workshop of the brain. That's where we focus, where we have intention. So we have attention, where we have free will. We restrain our behaviors,
Judgment,
we
reason.
invent, we speculate. It's the creative center, right? And that fourth thing was that they believed there was an intelligence that was giving them life that they would trust and surrender to. Whatever that consciousness is that's giving us life, that's within us, that's happening I'll say it scientifically, the autonomic nervous system, the limbic brain, right, is the seat of all of those biological functions that keeps us in homeostasis and balance, right? The neocortex, the thinking brain, is the analytical mind, and a lot of times that's what kind of gets us in trouble, right? So they had a belief, and independent of religion, that there was some intelligence that was giving them life that could help them in their healing process. Now, there was a spectrum involved in that, but the similarity was that it was within them. So there came a period of time where I was in a documentary, and the documentary became really popular, and people started asking, well, how do you do it? And I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. I think it's a time in history to know how, right?
Correct.
So I thought, okay, I studied all these things, went back to school and studied neuroscience and just got really into it. And then I was like, okay, if it worked on these sick people, let's see if we can reproduce an outcome. And so for the first couple of years, we didn't really see much. I was doing these one-day courses and two-day courses, and people were feeling better at the end of the weekend, but no real big changes. Then all of a sudden, it just started happening. We started seeing the most amazing changes in people's health that really challenged my belief. And so when we started seeing people have remissions from very serious stage 4 cancers and Parkinson's disease and MS and ALS and spinal cord injuries and all kinds of crazy things, that's when I knew it was time to measure. And so we organized a group of scientists, and now I work with University of California, San Diego. And so when I started seeing the outcomes, Michael, and they were unbelievable. They were literally unbelievable to me. Like, I was shaking my head, like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing. And I knew that when a person has an inward experience where they're in a certain health condition, and then after we use meditation as, and we'll talk about that, demystifying meditation in a way that allows a person to learn how to make an inward experience really, really real. And so I knew that when a person got up out of a wheelchair with MS, right in front of me, like something was happening in there. Something was happening inside of them that was very profound and very real, right? And it was an experience, right? So we organized, we've got over 20,000 brain scans. We have fMRI scans. We've measured thousands and thousands of HRV measurements. We've measured gene expression. We've measured microbiome. We've measured 2,882 metabolites in blood. We've measured immune regulation. We've measured tears. We've measured breast milk. We've measured everything you can possibly imagine. And the idea is, what happens when a person completely immerses themselves in a community that's interested in change and transformation? And that's what we teach. We teach the process of change. We use meditation not to heal. We use meditation to change. And when you change, you heal, right? So the science has been so compelling because you can't call it pseudoscience anymore. The data is so profound that it shows that, as an example, the studies that we've done demonstrate that the human nervous system manufactures a pharmacy of chemicals that works sometimes better than any drug, and it's within you. And is it possible then to upregulate genes for health and downregulate the genes for disease? And if you teach people in a very simple way the philosophy, the theory, the information, the knowledge, and they can learn that information. Learning is making new connections in the brain, as you know, but the research also shows that if you don't review it, if you don't repeat it, if you don't think about it over and over again, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So we set up these large events with thousands of people from all over the world, and the information is so tantamount for them because it's what they're going to do with it. They got to do something with it. So when they learn the information, then they have to teach it back to the person next to them. They have to be able to explain it. And if they can't explain it, it's not wired in their brain. So as they remind themselves what they learned, they're reproducing that same level of mind. And nerve cells that fire together wire together. And the more you understand what you're doing, and the more you understand why you're doing it, the how gets easier, because you can assign meaning to the task. And when you assign meaning to the task, you turn on that prefrontal cortex and it wants an outcome, right? So they're installing the neurological hardware in their brain in preparation for the event. So if you can set up the conditions in the environment and give people the proper instructions, and they get their behaviors to match their intentions, their actions equal to their thoughts, they get their mind and body working together and initiate that knowledge, they should have an experience, right? And the experience then enriches the circuitry in the brain, but the end product of the experience is called an emotion. And then when you feel unlimited, or you feel grateful, or you feel empowered, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So the information is no longer in the brain, now the information's in the body, right? So the person's embodying the truth of that philosophy. So this is kind of the journey, what we do. So then we're measuring what's taking place inwardly. Now, if you can go for 7 days and keep reproducing the experience, neurologically and neurochemically, you're conditioning the mind and body to begin to work as one. And when the body now knows how to do it better than the mind, now it's, implicit, it's innate, it's automatic, it's easy, it's familiar. We've become that knowledge, right? And so the person's in a different state of being. So we have to go from philosopher to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from the thinking to doing to being, learning with your head, applying with your hands, knowing it by heart. And we discovered that it's the overcoming process that is the becoming process, because 95% of who we are, by the time we're in the middle of our life, are a set of memorized, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, the automatic and unconscious habits and behaviors and reflexive emotional responses. So it's that unlearning process, that 95% of being unconscious, getting conscious. And if a person's able to do that, if they're able to reconstruct and reinvent a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving, a new way of feeling, will it be reflected in their biology? And we've discovered that the majority of people that go through a week-long event, it's not like a small percentage, there's a community effect that's taking place. So I think when we're brought to our lowest denominator, whether it's crisis, disease, diagnosis, loss, betrayal, it doesn't matter. You reach this lowest denominator where nothing is making that feeling go away. No vacation, no TV show, no friend, where that feeling is
the alcohol,
constant.
the drugs, the numbing,
the drugs,
it's
the
not
alcohol,
working anymore.
Nothing is making that feeling go away. And I think this is a really important moment for people, because they don't feel like themselves. Nothing in their environment, in their outer world, is making this feeling go away. And this is where they start, for the first time, observing themselves, that idea of metacognition. They feel so different than the way they normally feel that they can view themselves through the eyes of someone else. This is the moment where they can all of a sudden go, oh my God, look at the way you've been thinking. You've been saying, I can't, it's too hard, I hate this person. Those thoughts have consequences. You can say, oh my God, you've been complaining, blaming, you've been a victim, you've been judging, making excuses, feeling sorry for yourself. Oh my God, look at you. Like it's that lighting the match in the dark place. And then you can say, oh my God, I live the majority of my life in hatred and anger and fear. Oh my God, that's not loving to me. But no one is going to you're not going to listen to anybody when they tell you that. You're going to bump them off, right? But this is kind of when the soul kind of give you a little nudge, like this is your moment, right? And so we see that the brain changes the most when you get beyond, I can't, I'm too tired, I don't feel like it, I want to quit, this is too hard, I'll never make it. When you get beyond, like people who are curious, what's on the other side of that thought? They're stepping into the unknown. Mm-hmm. The person who says, oh my God, I want to be happy, why am I spending the majority of my day complaining? Well, complaining is not going to make me happy, it's going to make me unhappy. And then, oh my God, this emotion that I live by every day, emotions are just a chemical record of the past, right? So a person feels frustration because of an experience that happens, or has a series of experiences that happen in their life. The stronger the emotion that we have to some experience in our life, the more altered we are inside of us. The disruption in our chemical continuity causes the brain to freeze a frame and take a snapshot or a series of snapshots, and that's called the long-term memory. So that the memory is embossed in the brain, right? And then you review the event, you keep remembering the event, you're producing the same chemistry in the brain and body as if the event was occurring. And the body's so objective, it's the unconscious mind, that it does not know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person's fabricating by memory alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. So the body's reliving the trauma 50 to 100 times a day. So it's a thought and a feeling, it's an image and an emotion, or a memory and emotion, it's a stimulus and response, and you're conditioning the body to become the mind of that emotion. And so now the body, the servant, is now the master. So the body has learned it, and it's automatic. And so you're sweeping your environment just to look for something to actually cause you to feel frustrated. So the hormones of stress become highly addictive. And it's entirely possible that people use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to frustration, to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. So they don't know they're doing that consciously, but they're becoming addicted to the life they don't even like. The stress response is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. Okay, well, all biological organisms can tolerate short-term stress. The zebra gets chased by the lion, it outruns the lion, it goes back to grazing and eating, and it goes back into balance, right? So all organisms can do that. You get cut off on the freeway, you jam on the brakes, and then you're over it, right? For most people. But when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Now, human beings, because of the size of the frontal lobe, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. If you're forecasting some future worst-case scenario based on the past, and you're actually imagining that future unfolding, your body, as the objective mind, begins to feel the emotion of that future before it happens. And now you're conditioning your body to become the mind of anxiety, the mind of fear, right? And again, thought and a feeling, image, emotion, stimulus, response. The body's being conditioned into fear. Okay, so now you say to that person, why are you this way? And they'll say, I am this way because of these events that have happened to me 10 years ago. What they're really saying is, I had an event that's changed me biologically, and I have not been able to change since. Okay, so if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and those chemicals, the hormones of stress, are addictive, the arousal, you can become addicted to your own thoughts, and this is why it's hard to change. Well, if the long-term effects of the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons and create disease, that's a fact, and you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, your thoughts can make you sick. All right, now that's the ultimate mind-body connection. So when you tell a person that and they go, oh my God, you ask them, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? And so we did a study where we just took people and we said, trade frustration, trade impatience, trade resentment for a heart-centered emotion. Let's hook you up to an HRV and let's have you practice. Get really good at feeling appreciation, gratitude, kindness, care. Let's get you in that state. Is it possible then that you can upregulate the proteins for your immune system and downregulate the secretion of cortisol? And the amount of immunoglobulin A, which is a really important, natural flu shot for the body, went up 50% in the participants. So the body actually is believing it's living in an environment that's nurturing, right? And so heart-centered meditation, to 15 minutes. 15 minutes a day, twice a day, or 3 times a day for 3 days. That's it. That's how fast it can happen. Now, the caveat behind this is that just like breaking any addiction, you're going to go through a lot of withdrawals because the body's going to be craving the chemical, right? So we've discovered, again, when the person is sitting in a meditation and they're coming up against their frustration, they're coming up against their resentment, they're coming up against their impatience, instead of saying, I can't meditate, I'm too busy, I'm getting on my cell phone, I have too many things to do. Nobody else in the herd or the flock or the tribe is everybody sitting, right? So the person, we're not asking them to white knuckle it, we're giving them something to do. We're teaching them how to lower the volume to that emotion, settle the body back down as the mind, and teach them what to do with that. So the act of doing that, breaking that, the inhibition process, breaking the stimulus and response, the body's craving 20 years or 10 years of frustration. It starts to send images to the brain like, think of the time in your life that, and it's trying to reproduce that chemical. So this takes an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of awareness to be able to free the body from the chains of the past. And yet, once you learn how to do it, it's tedious in the beginning. If the person truly can get beyond their addiction to that emotion, the absence of that emotional addiction is called joy. The body's no longer tormented. Yeah, the side effect of that is there's a complete change in the body's physiology. I think the majority of time, people are on alert. They're in high beta brainwave states. They're vigilant. They're ready. When we're living in stress and we're living in survival, all of our attention is on our environment. That's where the danger is. Mm-hmm. All of our attention is on our body because we're getting the rush of chemistry and adrenaline, and all of our attention is on time. Like, how much time is we got to make this go away, right? And so when you break free from the state of survival, which pretty much is about 70% of the time for most people. Yeah, for the most part, I feel like it's a safe place. I think when you're living in survival, I think you'll always perceive it as a dangerous place. Mm-hmm. But I think the opposite side of that, and this is kind of what we've discovered, I think when you live in something other than survival, you live in a state of creation. And I think a state of creation is when energy naturally moves into the heart, and the heart is the creative center. When you're living in stress and you're living in survival, your brain is completely incoherent because you're trying to control and predict everyone and everything in your life. So stress is created by the loss of control, the perception that something's going to get worse or something that you can't predict, right? So the alarm system switches on. So the next thing you start doing is you try to control and predict everything in your life. Well, every person, every object, everything, every place is mapped neurologically in your brain. You've got a neurological network for your wife, for your husband, for your kids, for your dog, for where you live, where you work, your phone, So as we shift our attention to each one of these different elements, like a lightning storm in the clouds, in that aroused high beta state, the different compartments of the brain begin to modulate and they begin to fire out of order. If you measure that on the brain, it's waves that are out of order and they cancel each other out, and the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. Same thing happens in the heart. You're stepping on the gas and you're stepping on the brake. You're in a Zoom meeting, someone's talking, and you're thinking about, oh my God, your emotional response is not the best. But you're not running, you're not fighting, you're not hiding, you're sitting there, right? So you're stepping on the gas and the brake, and the heart starts beating very, very much out of order. It becomes very incoherent. Same thing, the energy in the heart goes down. You can't trust, it's not a time to communicate, you know the story. So we've discovered that where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So we teach people then, if you can place your attention on your heart, slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down. Mm-hmm. And teach them how to work with their body and convert from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system and get their body in that state. It takes practice. It takes a lot of work. In the beginning, you're working with the animal, and the animal's juiced up, and it's ready to go, and you got to teach it that the threat, the danger is over, and it's not very trusting in the beginning. So slow your breathing down, slow your brain waves down, convert over, put your attention on your heart, and let's practice feeling some heart-centered, some elevated emotions. If a person can sustain that state, we'll see their heart get very coherent. When it gets coherent, energy builds, and if they can sustain it, something really beautiful happens. It's almost like the heart informs the brain that the trauma is over, and it resets the baseline for the past event where the emotion is attached to. And we've seen this numerous times. It tells the amygdala, it's over, like the trauma's over, and then all of a sudden, the body resets and the brain resets, and the person all of a sudden, like grabbing a big sheet and going like this, they go right out of beta, high beta, and they go right into alpha, coherent alpha. And the heart's telling the brain, get creative. When you're pressed like that, we tend to overfocus. We tend to narrow our focus on the cause of the problem. Like any of us who have been under stress know that, for the most part, you're obsessing, you're ruminating, you're over-focused on something. And we discover that when you do that, you actually make your brain worse 100% 100% of the time, like, because you're analyzing your life within that disturbing emotion. Yeah. That emotion is a record of the past, and you're driving it into higher and higher beta, right? So we thought, oh my God, what if we do the opposite? What if we go from this kind of narrow focus on everything physical, everything material, everything known, to broadening and opening our focus and putting it on nothing? In the act of sensing space, we discovered when you're sensing, you're not analyzing and you're not thinking. In the cortex is the analytical mind. So as you're sensing space and you're no longer analyzing and thinking, you're no longer activating those different neurological networks in the brain. And all of a sudden, your brain goes from beta to alpha, but not any kind of alpha. Those different compartments of the brain that have been modulated and compartmentalized, they begin to unify, they begin to synchronize. So now the brain starts getting more orderly and you start feeling more like yourself. So the breathing is a great way to get the body to convert from sympathetic to parasympathetic, but the open and the broadened focus and sensing nothing in space is actually what allows us to get beyond our analytical mind, and what separates our conscious mind from our subconscious mind is our analytical mind. Now you're opening the door and getting into the operating system where you can actually rewrite a program and rehearse a new script. Just by closing your eyes and focusing on nothing, you can slip past the analytical mind. And when you're in alpha, you know this, you tend to see more in images and pictures. You're more creative, right? And then you can train a person to actually know the different brainwave states. And my definition of theta is when your body's resting in a light sleep and you're awake. And that's when the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. This is the most suggestible state of the brain. It's a hypnotic state. If a person can sit and practice this, we discovered that the formula is relaxed and awake. Relaxed, the more relaxed you get in your heart, the more energy goes to the brain. Now, so the sensors are picking up electromagnetic signals. The heart, when it gets coherent, produces a magnetic field. And that magnetic field can be up to 3 meters wide. It is like a drum. It gets very coherent and it produces a magnetic field, a very measurable magnetic field. So it informs the brain to be creative, and it causes a kind of a frequency or energy is carrying information. So there's an emission of energy that's released from the heart. If a person can get relaxed in their heart and awake in their brain, you can train a person to get really good at this. It gets really crazy because what takes place from coherence is another phase called resonance. And resonance is when the brain is in delta and at the same time in theta and at the same time in alpha and the same time in beta and high beta, and all of a sudden you have this very peak frequency called gamma, and that's super consciousness. So now the person is really relaxed in their heart, and instead of stressed out, unconscious, and programmed, somehow they tend to be way more conscious. So instead of the arousal being pain, instead of the arousal being aggression, the arousal is kind of like what you said. It's kind of like an ecstasy. It's kind of like a bliss. Like a person is like, this feels so good, I don't want to leave the moment. Like I want to stay right here. And what we want to do is get people to do that so well with their eyes closed that they can do it with their eyes open. And that's why we do walking meditations and things like that. It's like I'm looking at 2,000 people in an audience and everybody's leaning in, because that is the example of truth up there. They're saying, I broke through a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness, and the person in the audience invariably that has that similar condition sees that person. They don't look any more special than them, and their belief in possibility goes up. And I think people do the best with what they think is available. So you get enough people together in the spirit of that, I think people become conscious of other possibilities. And just like an infection can spread amongst the community and create disease, health and wellness can become as infectious as disease in 7 days. So we did this study and we found out that we had all these people everybody had their own genotype, right? Their own particular gene expression based on their race, their culture, their family, whatever. And genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. The expression of proteins is the expression of life. At the end of 7 days, all these different genotypes, almost 80% of the collective were expressing the same genes and making the same proteins. Like, that's unheard of. So, like, people change people, but there was an emergent consciousness that was taking place, that was being reflected in people's biology. The herd, the flock, the tribe, the school of fish, everybody's evolving together in 7 days. So if you don't know that that's possible, that you could actually use imagery to heal some type of lesion, then you'll make the typical choice. But the fact that you do know that you have a hand in it, you could actually do something, I can do something to help my health. And it may not be in like a pill immediate. You got to put in the work. You got to put in the time, and you have to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. There can be no false hope. When I saw people, like I saw that I was truly making a difference on some level in their life, that was the moment I didn't care. Like, I really didn't care about the academic who was sitting there judging me. He or she's gonna judge me anyway. I really don't care. Like, that's fine. I'm more interested in people who do want to learn. Those are the people that I'm after, right? So they can have their judgments about me and say all kinds of things, but I really don't care anymore. I really don't care. I know on some level, between the evidence that's taking place in human testimony, and there's enough, we have hundreds, if not thousands now, of people who have healed themselves, and we have amazing evidence in empirical scientific studies. Evidence is the loudest voice. And so chronic health conditions in themselves, just stay in the lane of convention, require a lifestyle change. And chronic health conditions make up 95% of all health conditions because of lifestyle, because of behaviors, because of choices. Okay, so a pharmaceutical may alleviate and give you some chemical balance. But if you're not physically balanced and you're not emotionally balanced, that's going to do very little. So teach a person then the structure of what it really means to change. People don't do the meditations in our work to heal. They do the meditations to change. So it's just 3 things: the way they think, the way they act, and the way they feel. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality is intimately connected to your personal reality. So then let's unlearn the old personality that's 95% hardwired, conditioned, and habituated. And that's the hard work. That's the overcoming process. And then let's fire and wire new thoughts in our brain. What do I want to believe? A belief is just a thought I keep thinking over and over again. So let's, with intention, let's with attention, begin to install the hardware. Keep doing it. It becomes a software program. That's the new voice in your head. That's the new belief. I can. It's possible. That's my vision. Okay. A person who's healing from a health condition may have a good meditation in the morning, 45 minutes, hour, half hour, whatever, but then spends the rest of their day, frustrated, impatient, angry, suffering, fearful. Let me mentally rehearse how I'm going to be in those circumstances. Now, you know this, the act of mental rehearsal. You close your eyes and you rehearse doing something, whether you're playing the piano or doing a sport or whatever. You know this extremely well. When you're truly present, the brain cannot distinguish between the actual event and what you're imagining. So what you're imagining becomes the experience, and the brain looks like you've been playing the piano for 5 days. It looks like you've been hitting a golf ball for the last week. The brain looks like you've already done it. Now, the brain's no longer a record of the past now. Now you're priming it as a map to the future. You're installing the hardware. Right. Keep doing it. You behave differently around your coworker. There's no magic here. You behave differently around your ex or whoever. You're changing, right? Now the changes be greater than your environment. To think, act, and feel differently in the same environment. Okay, now, can I stay in my heart? Can I feel an elevated emotion today? Let me just bring up the feeling I want to feel today, and let me bring it up 100 times so I can bring it up on my own, right? So the word meditation then means to become familiar with. That's what it means. To become so familiar, so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't default and go unconscious in your waking day. That is a great day. And then, okay, let me remind myself how I am going to think. Let me remind myself how I'm going to act at the staff meeting, how I'm going to act with my kids, how I'm going to act when I'm here. What would greatness look like? What would love do? Let me just rehearse it in my mind so I can get my behaviors to match my intention. Let me get really clear. Okay, no person, no circumstance, no condition in my life is going to move me from this elevated emotion. Now the game is on. You're out of the bleachers. You're on the playing field now, because the person who's truly interested in healing says, the moment I start feeling those familiar emotions, I'm signaling the same genes. And genes make proteins. It's the environment that signals the gene, okay? The end product from an experience in the environment is an emotion. So as long as I live by this emotion, I'm signaling the same genes. Okay, is it possible then, if I feel this elevated emotion and I'm able to sustain it, that I could actually, my body would believe it's living in a different environment? And if the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, by me feeling this elevated emotion my entire day, I can signal genes ahead of the environment. What we discovered, if you have intention in that state, 100% of the people actually signal the gene to make a protein. 100%. That's a pretty good odds it's going to happen. When we discovered, Mike, that was really crazy when people started hitting these, and I talk about it in the documentary, where they're hitting these high states of gamma, like 3 standard deviations outside of normal when you're measuring anything is 2% of the population. That's very, very good. We're getting high gamma, coherent, high gamma brainwave patterns, 200, 300, 400 standard deviations outside of normal. 3 is an outlier. So you imagine 197 more, 297 more of those little boxes. This is a person who's having a supernatural amount of order in their autonomic nervous system. So if stress is autonomic dysregulation, then the person who's functioning in that coherent, highly regulated, very intense gamma brainwave state that's producing some kind of ecstasy or bliss, that's an enormous amount of autonomic regulation. And when people hit that moment, somehow there's an immediate biological upgrade in their body. There's the condition, and now it's gone, because the autonomic nervous system is controlling and coordinating every other system in the body, right? So now the information that's traveling to the cell, to the tissue, to the organ, to the system is very, very coherent, is very clear, and the frequency is very fast. And so a person somehow gets this kind of upgrade. Now that's where we've gotten, that's like the instantaneous stuff where I'm shaking my head and going, muscular dystrophy? I mean, come on, there's no cure for muscular dystrophy. The kid came in a wheelchair and he's walking out of the event. I'm scratching my head, how did that happen? He had that moment of arousal, but the arousal was an enormous amount of gamma, and it wasn't happening in his thinking neocortex. It was happening in the limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system, on fire. And that's regulating enormous amounts of order, right? And you should see the scientists, because these are guys that have published 200, 300 papers. They're very empirical. Now we're working with Harvard scientists and some Stanford people too, and they see the data. The first thing they fall out of their chair with is 7 days. Like a drug trial is 3 months, 6 months. They're like, what? 7 days, and it's not like 10% of the population. It's 80%, it's 70%.
Of your population.
Yeah, the community.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of insane. They're like, what? No drug trial does that. Best drug trial is 25%, 1 out of 4. This is 3 out of 4. And I keep saying to the scientists, where are those chemicals coming from? Where are they coming from? Where are they coming from? The person's not ingesting anything. They're not changing their diet. How can a person's microbiome in 7 days be completely different? Completely different. At least 15 probiotic, really powerful, in large communities, changes in microbiome. The only answer is they're not the same person. If they were the same person, they'd have the same microbiome,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
If a different person, completely different microbiome. I think that any methodology can work as long as the person understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think that's important. And there's elements of mindfulness in the work that we do, but the scientists call it WTF-fulness. Like what? Like what is that? Like what is that? And I honestly believe that when you get in that right brain state, like theta, you're suggestible to information. You're in a hypnotic state, right? And suggestibility is your ability to accept information, believe information, surrender to it without analyzing it, and somehow it programs the subconscious or affects the autonomic nervous system. But if your eyes are closed and you're in a meditation and the music's filling the space and you're not seeing anything, you're not hearing ambient sounds, you're not tasting, you're not smelling, you're not feeling anything with your physical body, but you're still suggestible to information, there's only one other place you can get information from, that's frequency, right? So get the nervous system tuned up to order, and there's an invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses that we are immersed in, that somehow the brain can transduce that frequency into information in our biology, because 25 hours of focusing a lot of times on a good portion of that on nothing physical and material, somehow there's effects, dramatic effects in people's biology, to the extent that at the end of 7 days, their biology looks like they're living in a whole new life. It looks like they're living in a whole new environment, and they're in a ballroom, and there's really nothing really spectacular in a ballroom. I've been to thousands of them. They all look the same. I'll tell you what we know so far. HRV levels after the 7-day event continue to improve for 2 to 3 weeks. In other words, we do these healings on each other, and you got to get into this super altered state. And we see the heart go completely out of order. Like there's an arousal that's insane, and you see it in the collective. That experience produces an emotion of love and joy that tends to linger for weeks, if not months after the event. The person's just feeling a whole different feeling. We see brain coherence sustained. We see certain people, not all of them, their microbiome stays changed. We see some people regress because they stop doing the work and they return back to their environment, and their environment is controlling how they're feeling and controlling how they're thinking and controlling how they're acting, and they return back to the same personality. And so you see this kind of encroachment slowly over time of disease starting to reoccur. But I think really one of the cool things that I'm proud about with our community is that people do the work. And I don't think they do it because they have to. I think they do it because there's magic happening in their life with opportunities and synchronicities and coincidences, and that inspires them to want to keep the magic going. So, we've seen great changes, and we've seen the people who have those high gamma moments where there's the Parkinson's and now it's gone, those tend to be very permanent. Like we very rarely see like there's a regression of the condition. And we have a language expert, that at the University of Central Oklahoma. He's really studies the language of transformation, and he started off studying I think it was 26 or 28 case histories of people that tell their testimonial, their story of transformation. And he's got a huge AI system, and we were picking apart the language of transformation so that I can actually teach it better. And I know the words then that I could use to help people get there easier. And one of the main things that happens in people who really fully immerse themselves is that the word "I felt it" or "feel it" is the most common word, and it breaks down into two venues. One is it's very somatic. Like, I don't know what that was. Like, my heart blew open, the top of my head blew off. There was lightning bolts coming out of my hand. I could feel every atom in my body vibrating to a certain level of order. It's very somatic, like, what the hell? And the other component, Mike, is it's very emotional. Like, I never felt love like that before. I never felt anything. I don't even have the word to describe it. But as a consequence of that experience, there's a temporality. Like, I'm not that person any longer. Like, that's not me. That used to be. That's a different person. I'm somebody else, right? And so those high arousals where the person moves into those states, there's an upgrade that takes biologically that's sustained for a good period of time. So I'm a morning person. I've always been a morning person. I have a lot of things that I have to do in one day. My belief is that if I can get myself right, if I can overcome myself at the beginning of the day, everybody else is easy. So I allow for 2 hours every morning. Doesn't mean I necessarily take 2 hours, but I like the morning where everybody's asleep. I'm early riser. I get in my think box. It's really important. I pace. I move around. I get, okay. I think about the obvious things. Okay, I look at my calendar. I get all that taken care of. Okay, this, that, the other thing. I get all that worked out, and then it is really me sitting down and doing the work. My goal is to be the example, really, of everything that I teach. So I have to lead by example, and I think experience is the greatest professor. So I'm gonna step into. We interface with the world. I have lots of Zoom calls, lots of meetings, lots of things to learn. But really, my morning practice is getting myself ready for my day. How am I going to face unexpected things? And how long am I going to emotionally react for if I react? I mean, it's not that you react. The question is, how long are you going to keep that going, right?
Got it.
Yeah. So then there's things I'm working on with myself, that I always want to unlearn and relearn. But then there's Joe Dispenza on the journey, right? How do I want to be? One day, one lifetime.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I can. Let me see if I can embody this person. Let me see if I can keep my energy up. Let me see if I can stay in my heart. Let me see if I can really be present and considerate and kind. And then the rest of the day, I'm serving. The rest of the day, I'm busy. And my ambition is to be able to maintain that modified state of mind and body my entire day. Only for the simple reason that I want the synchronicity. I want the weird opportunity. I want the unusual thing that caused me to go, did I really create that? Am I somehow in the creative process here, instead of being the victim of my life, that person, that circumstance is actually controlling my feelings and thoughts and ultimately my behaviors. That's a program, right? So I want to switch from that mode into being the creator. So I got to get in the state where I can create. And that means sometimes it takes me a little bit longer. And sometimes it takes me like almost an hour to get beyond myself, but I'm not going to get up until I'm that person. And I don't care if I run over. It's just, in the light of all eternity, that's worth it to me, right? So,
Very cool.
So I allow for those 2 hours. Sometimes the whole entire 2 hours I'm inward. And other times I fall into the fold, and it's like you said, you're there, and you just want to elongate the moment. You don't do anything except, I always say, memorize this feeling. Dude, memorize this feeling. Memorize it. Bring it up. Keep remembering this feeling. This is who you are, right? So when I open my eyes, and I do that, my day's differently than when I don't. And I like the synchronicities. I like the unknown experiences, because it proves to me that I am the creator of my life. At the end of my day, it's always the same question. How'd you do, dude? Like, how did you do today? Like, when did you fall from grace? What person, what circumstance? When did you lose it? When did you go unconscious? Then, of course, the next question is, new day, tomorrow. How are you going to think different? How are you going to behave differently in that same circumstance? Another shot at it, Joe Dispenza. What would you do? And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to look it up and find out what would somebody somewhere sometime must have faced this, and how did they do it? So let me just learn that, and then let me integrate that into my evolution, right? Because what I want to do is I just want to make steady strides in my own evolution. And sometimes I work on things for months, but I know I know that when I change, my life changes. I mean, I know that. Nothing changes in our life until we change, right? So again, if I could work with it, if it takes me 2 months to get there, it's always worth the effort. My biggest challenge is time. I mean, I do a lot of things, and I think it's a commodity. But if I'm in the present moment and I'm not thinking about time, somehow it magically works. So I work a lot on that. But one thing that really works well for me, and I'm totally happy with this, is that I just need time alone, and I think that helps me the most. I really like studying people who have near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. It's just really fascinating to me because when they come back, their brain's completely different, for sure, and their worldview is different. There's nothing greater than being a part of a human being's transformation. There's nothing greater when you can celebrate someone's personal change and transformation. And I think the greatest form of gratitude that we can ever experience is when we receive gratitude from someone else. I think there's an empathy that's innate in us that we kind of go, we feel what that person's feeling when their life has changed, right? Or they're appreciative. And I think our social networks switch on. I think we come together, we commune, we connect more, and I think there's a greater appreciation for life. And so mission-driven people are people who really want to make a difference in people's lives. And I think it's the highest form of motivation. And I think people, we see this in our work all the time. Like, people come for wealth, they come for health, they come for relationships, they come for a mystical experience. It doesn't matter to me. That's just one experience. Like the people who actually heal themselves, they're not victimized by their disease. That they tell me I would have never changed. I would have never changed unless I had this disease, right? And so then, but what people ultimately come for after they arrive at whatever it is they arrive at is wholeness. They just want wholeness. I mean, imagine being so whole you no longer want. How could you want when you're whole? And somehow, the self-reported questionnaires that we do around that there's a direct correlation with the heart and the brain, coherence in the heart and the brain, that synchronization that takes place, and that kind of explanation, like I don't want anything. And I think when we're in that state, everybody's okay. I think there's 3 types of stress: physical, chemical, and emotional.
Okay.
I think there's 3 types of balance: physical, chemical, and emotional. I work really hard in my life to be physically balanced, chemically balanced, and emotionally balanced. The hard one out of the 3, because 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a health care facility walks in because of psychological and emotional stress. So you could be visualizing all you want, seeing your arteries clear. You could be an emotional basket case, and it's not going to work because the heart in survival and stress is out of balance, right? So there's got to be the right, I believe there's got to be a right state that you have to be in to be able to have the visual process be the most effective. Because otherwise, it's trying, it's forcing, it's wishing, it's hoping, it's fighting, it's competing. That's lack. That's like, we cannot attract anything in our life that we feel separate from. So in order for the person to heal their heart has to be open. Their heart has to be activated. That center's got to be awakened. Then the greatest effects that you can see, and we've seen this with people, the greatest effects takes place beyond our comprehension of how that little protrusion disappeared, how did it disappear? It's none of your business. The autonomic nervous system can manufacture chemistry. Like, that's insane. We've proven it. So, like, it's none of your business. All you have to do is, when it happens and how it happens is none of our business, but we got to be in the right state, right? Getting people in the right state is the challenge. Then the rehearsal, the positive imagery, all that stuff has the greatest outcome. But that works better in children, we discovered, than in adults. What works better in adults is for them to change. If I change, my heart should change. If I change, my life should change. And people say, I don't know, 80% of the tumors went away. I wasn't doing anything. Like I was just doing my meditations. Well, of course, you're in homeostasis and your body's back in balance because stress is the lack of homeostasis. Some people's goals when they have a diagnosis is not like I'm going to heal. Their goal is like, I've been out of homeostasis for the last 10 years. My job is to get back into homeostasis. If I get back into homeostasis, there's a better shot of me healing. Now, then with that comes a lot of challenges. Like I said, it's not that you react. Yeah, it's how long you react. We accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts equal to our emotional state. So the bottom up is important. The top down is the application, is the technique, right?
Yeah,
but you got to set up the conditions. And I think I've done everything wrong. I've made all the wrong turns. Like I'll try this, I'll try that.
Yeah.
And so I don't do any type of meditation that's traditional. I just look at the data. People come for all kinds of reasons. The baseline is that they understand on some level that meditation can change their body and change their life. Some people understand that that they could have mystical experiences without using any exogenous substances. So we have people that come that want to heal their body, that want to have a new job or a new career or become abundant, people that want to have loving relationships, some people want to have mystical experiences, whatever that is, right? But the person is coming with the intention of actually creating exactly what they want. But in time, what they're really coming for is to change. And even the people who heal from all kinds of health conditions, what I learned in the last couple of years is they're not doing their meditations to heal, they're doing their meditations to change. And when they change, they heal. And so what they begin to crave is the next unknown experience, that experience that exists really beyond three-dimensional reality. But I would say that the majority of people come for a particular reason, and after a period of time, they just want to get more whole. And I don't think there's an end to that. The stronger the emotion we feel from some event in our life, a trauma, a betrayal, a loss, a shock, a diagnosis, the event produces an emotional response. And the high quotient of the emotional response changes our internal state. And the moment we feel altered inside of us, the brain takes a snapshot, freezes a frame or a series of frames and takes snapshots, and that's called a long-term memory. So then, from a biological perspective, every time the person remembers the problem, they're producing the exact same chemistry in their brain and body. Cortisol, the adrenaline, whatever the emotion is. When they feel that emotion, we could say then that the body is reliving the event emotionally 50 to 100 times in a day. So the trauma is no longer in the brain at that point. Now the trauma is also in the body because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And it's that thought and that feeling, it's that image and that emotion, it's that stimulus and response that's conditioning the body subconsciously to become the mind of that emotion. And now that person emotionally is branded into the past. And you can say to them, why are you this way? Why are you so angry? Why are you so bitter? Why are you so mistrusting? Why are you so afraid? And they'll say to you, I am this way because of these events or that event that happened to me in my life 20 or 30 years ago. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because, in a sense, their identity is completely connected to their past. And as long as they feel that emotion, they'll always remember the past. So now, the body is so objective when it feels that emotion, it does not know the difference between the real-life experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that person is fabricating by thought alone. So now, the body's believing it's living in the past event 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But what the person is really saying is, after that event, I haven't been able to change. Mm-hmm. That's what they're saying. And so
That becomes the person's identity, and there's nothing wrong with this. But you'll never hear me say in any of the work that we do, go back and process the past. We've discovered that when a person analyzes their problems within the emotions of the past, they make their brain worse. They actually drive it further out of balance. They're over-arousing it. We discovered is that if the person can get beyond the emotion, truly get beyond the emotion, they'll free themselves from the past. And what we discovered is that if you teach a person to give up the fear, the bitterness, the resentment, the frustration, the impatience, the judgment, you should stop feeling that emotion. I know there's a reason why. I'm sure everybody's got a story, right? So, but there's nothing that's going to change that story until you change, right? And so we discovered that if you trade those emotions for an elevated emotion, if you start feeling gratitude and appreciation and love and kindness and care, and you practice feeling that emotion, we give you some tools to use, to change your breathing, to put your attention in a different place, and to work with your body. What we discovered is when the person can truly begin to open their heart, and we have brain scans on this, when the heart begins to open and it begins to become coherent. In other words, when you're feeling frustration or impatience or judgment, your heart is beating very incoherently. When you're feeling love and gratitude, kindness and care, there's a rhythm, there's a cadence that the heart has that's very coherent. When the heart gets coherent, we measure this, it immediately informs the brain that the trauma is over. The heart tells the brain the past is over, the event is over, and it resets the baseline in the brain. And so now the person, when they look back at their past, they're no longer looking at it from the same level of consciousness. In fact, many of them will say, oh my God, I needed to go through all of that to get to this point right here. They'll tell you, they'll say, I wouldn't want to change one thing in my past because it got me to the present moment. Okay, so we work with Navy SEALs, special ops, prisoners. We work with people that have had some very serious traumas, have really serious abuses, just difficult childhoods. These people are, night terrors, suicidal, can't, leave their homes, socially having trouble, panic attacks. It's kind of funny because the moment that person actually breaks through from the emotion, and the words they typically describe, they say, was like my heart exploded. It's like my heart blew wide open. The moment that happens, they're bringing their body right out of the past, right into the present moment. And lo and behold, many times there goes the anxiety, there goes the depression, there goes the cyclic mood patterns. Somehow the body gets recalibrated back into order, back into homeostasis. So the point I'm making is that the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. And now you're ready for the next adventure in your life. The soul can't go to the next adventure if it's holding on to the past. So we don't really ever address the story, because the story is only firing and wiring the same circuits in the brain, reaffirming the identity to the past just to feel the same emotion. And the research shows that 50% of the story we tell in our past isn't even the truth. That means that people are reliving a miserable life they never even had, just to excuse themselves from changing, right? And I'm not taking shots at anybody. But what I am saying is you can't tell me that your past was so brutal that you can't change. Because we have seen people with some really, really horrible pasts that literally are completely different people that have completely different lives. When does the story end? And I'm not certain that insight changes behavior. You could have a realization, or even from an exogenous drug, you can have a realization or an insight. But if you still can't function in your life and you're still, you haven't connected with your wife, or, you're still dealing with trauma, it hasn't served you at all. Like, so the insight that your father was overbearing, or your mother was a perfectionist, or you were beaten as a kid, and that's why you're this way. It doesn't change the behavior. In order for us to change, we have to become so conscious of those unconscious beliefs. And what's a belief? A thought you just keep thinking over and over again, or how you've been programmed, right? It's a belief. We have to become so aware of our automatic habits and behaviors. And we have to pay attention to our emotional states if we're going to change. And staying conscious of our unconscious self is really the work that it takes to really overcome so you can become another person. That's 95% of a person by the middle of their life. They're, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, automatic habits and behaviors, and unconscious emotional responses. 95% of us is programmed. So as a child, your brain waves are very slow. The door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. Your brain waves are in alpha and theta, and so you're very suggestible to the information. And so your exposure to that caused you to learn that your observation caused you to get programmed to that's the way life is by mirror neurons looking at behaviors that are being programmed in you. So, but that's not who you are, right? So the fact that you became conscious, like, oh my God, I do this. Oh my God, I see where I got it from. Okay, that doesn't mean that I'm going to excuse myself and say I can't be in relationships. You could. Some people do that. Might be a different belief, but they do that. But you said, I really want to have a meaningful relationship. I really want to overcome this. This is part of me that I want to change, right? So you recognize that. That's called metacognition, right? The fact that you can objectify your subjective self and observe yourself. That's consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're conscious, then that's when you're not unconscious. Mm-hmm. And being unconscious is being in the program. So how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. So you said, okay, that's uncomfortable. That must mean something. And you actually went on a personal exploration.
Yeah.
Do something with the insight, with the provocation, with the interest of actually wanting to change yourself in some way so that you create a greater experience of life, that there is love in life and that you can have a committed relationship and it can be different from your parents. And now you know what you're not going to be, right? So I think all of that is valuable. I think every experience that we have in our life that programs us to be a certain way, sooner or later, if we're interested in arriving at the goals and dreams that we want, we have to leave that behind. Sooner or later, a part of us must die. And sooner or later, we have to leave that. So I think that's evolution. Consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention and noticing. So I think the first step is to become conscious that we're a certain way. And sometimes it lands as an insight or a download or a life experience that just kind of goes, you go, whoa, like, so I behaved this way or I did this thing. So I think when you don't have that, you don't have a conscience, and you can just keep staying in that world. But sooner or later, you have to become aware. What we know is that the more you practice being present, the better you get at it.
Okay.
And so how do you do that? If you sit in a meditation, right? And so there's a mode in the brain called default mode, and it's just always busy. It's consuming enormous amounts of energy in the brain, and it's always trying to predict the future based on what it knows in the past. It's a kind of an anticipation machine. It's always trying to fill in a known in reality so we feel safe. So a default mode system in the brain, when you close your eyes in a meditation, is going to immediately go into overdrive. It's going to say, oh, my back hurts a little bit. I'm kind of thirsty. How long is this going to go? I really don't want to do this. I don't like the music. It might be too long. Oh, I'm starting to get a little frustrated. I want to lay down. All of this stuff comes up. And then people have the belief and they say, I can't meditate. That's their conclusion from the experience. I'm not a good meditator. That's their affirmation. That's their belief, right? From that experience. But if you say to a person, listen, that's normal. But every time you catch yourself going unconscious and become conscious, that's a victory. And as tedious as it may be in the beginning, the more you catch yourself going unconscious and becoming conscious, the more conscious you become in your life. And all of a sudden, you begin to pay attention to things that you weren't paying attention to before. So in the work that we do, we say that being in the present moment, truly in the present moment, is being comfortable in the unknown, right? The present moment is the unknown because there is the familiar past that we feel emotionally, and we have the predictable future, which are both the knowns. Being in the present moment is being in the unknown, and that goes against thousands of years of programming because our biology is programmed that if we are truly in the unknown, we should be in survival. Because if you're in survival and you're in the fight or flight system, the unknown is a threat, it's a danger. So always try to predict the future based on the past, and you'll have better chances of survival. Predict the worst case scenario, be ready for that. Anything less that happens, you have better chance of surviving. So then to rest in the unknown goes against a lot of our biology. And we discovered that when a person keeps doing it over and over again, the body gets agitated, it gets frustrated, it gets impatient. Instead of the person saying, I quit, give them something to do, and they can lower the volume to the emotion and settle the animal down, like training an animal, settling the body back down into the present moment. We teach people how to do that, and that's the victory.
Giving them something to do.
Yeah, they have something to do when that comes up. And if they catch their mind going from a person, to another object, to their cell phone, to their computer, to a place they need to be, and at the time, and they catch themselves with their brain firing in modulated compartments. If they keep catching themselves doing that, if they keep doing that and they catch the circuit when it's firing and they settle it down, in time, sooner or later, they're going to stop firing those circuits in the brain. And their brain waves begin to change from an agitated, aroused state into a more coherent and slower brainwave state. So when they do this enough times, the brain begins to synchronize. The brain begins to fire in greater levels of wholeness or greater levels of order. So when that occurs, then the nervous system gets very regulated, gets very orderly. The autonomic nervous system moves into a state of regulation. Dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system is called stress, right? So to answer your question, when people do this really well, in just a few days, they'll get really good at it. The side effect of that is they get very relaxed in their heart. It's relaxed in the heart, and it's awake in the brain. And the more relaxed you get in your heart, we've discovered, really relaxing into your heart, the more the heart informs the brain to get creative. And so now the person has this kind of synchronization that's taking place between their heart and their brain as well. And they can rest in the present moment. The way you do that is you define what it really means to change. And to change is to be greater than the conditions in your environment, to be able to think, act, and feel differently in your same environment. That's what change is. To change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than its drives, in the meditation I'm speaking specifically, greater than its emotional responses, its memories, its emotional reactions, greater than its habits. The habit is when you've done something so many times, the body knows how to do it better than the conscious mind. That's so if you're sitting in a meditation, your body wants to get up and wants to get going and got people to see, things to do. That's kind of like automatic, right? And people get up and they say, I can't meditate. But if you tell them that when you notice that, you bring your body back into the present moment, you settle it down and tell it it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. You're training the animal. Sooner or later, the body literally responds to a new mind. And there's literally a liberation of energy. The body begins to liberate energy. And if the person's not thinking about time, if you're not thinking about where you need to be, where you need to go, where you were yesterday, where you're sitting, where you live, if you're not thinking about any place, you can go from somewhere to nowhere. And if you're not thinking about the predictable future or the familiar past, you can go from sometime to no time. And we discovered when a person becomes nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time, They literally become pure consciousness. And opening our awareness, I know this is kind of difficult to explain because we're materialists, opening our awareness to nothing and sensing space tends to cause us to move more into the eternal present moment. And there's a change that takes place in the brain. So we teach that. You'll become so conscious of those unconscious habits that more than likely you won't want to do them again. And that's what, for the most part, change is about. So I think people wait for crisis, they wait for disease, they wait for a betrayal, something to go wrong in their life. And that's when they go, okay, I'm ready to change. My message is, why wait, dude? Like, why wait for that? We can learn and change in a state of pain and suffering. We can learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration. So then you get a collective group of people together that really may have all those bad habits. They may even have bad habits that they don't even know they have. And then all of a sudden they become aware that they've been blaming and complaining and making excuses and feeling sorry for themselves and procrastinating. And they start to reason, if my personality creates my personal reality, if I'm going to create a new personal reality, I got to change my personality. Because this guy that's this isn't the guy that wants to be happy. This is the guy who's committed to being unhappy. Okay, let's break it down. Let's get down the fundamentals. And now we give them a roadmap of their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that they have lived by. You could say that step 2 is becoming conscious of your unconscious self, and then becoming conscious of a new self, reinventing a new self. And so the person who's feeling really bad about themselves because they're not doing anything to change, it's just because when you're not changing, you're still choosing. But what you're choosing is something that makes you feel familiar and comfortable. Because the moment you decide to change, truly get serious about change, the moment you decide to make a different choice and do something differently, you are going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be immediate. And that's the moment you go from the known into the unknown. Now, if the body has been emotionally conditioned to be the mind, like we talked about earlier, the servant is the master. And so the person who steps out into the unknown and it feels uncomfortable, what is the body going to say? Get back to suffering. Get back to feeling bad. Get back to feeling guilty. At least that's familiar, that's known. So tell a person there's going to be a biological death of the old self. Neurologically, chemically, hormonally, genetically, the old self's going to die. Just know that that's going to happen. But instead of white-knuckling it across the river of change, we're going to give you something to do, because that unknown place is the perfect place to create in. So let's get you into the unknown, but let's get you there where you're relaxed and awake. You're not escaping. And if you do that really well, you'll be in a creative state. So you actually will be out of survival and you'll be able to create, because you could only be in survival or creation. Can't be in both. So let's get your body physiologically back in the balance. Let's get it there. Now, who do you want to be? What do you want to believe? Let's review that. What's a belief? A thought you keep thinking over and over in your brain. Keep remembering to think this way in your meditation. How am I going to be with my ex or my boss? Let me close my eyes and think about what greatness looks like, what forgiveness would do, what love would do. Let me close my eyes and mentally rehearse how I'm going to be in that circumstance. I'm going to keep remembering to do these things so I don't forget. Keep doing it over and over again. You start installing the hardware. Repeat it enough times, it gets like a software program. You start behaving that way automatically. And then, my goodness, is it possible to teach our body emotionally how we do want to feel before it happens? In other words, don't wait for your wealth to feel abundant, or your success to feel empowered, or your healing to feel wholeness. That's waiting for something in your outer world to change, to take away the emptiness or lack that you're feeling in your inner world. Teach your body emotionally what it feels like ahead of the actual experience. And the moment you start feeling abundant, you're generating wealth. The moment you can embody empowerment, you're stepping towards your success. The moment you feel grateful and whole, the healing begins, right? So now you're starting to cause an effect in your life. So have the person keep remembering to feel that way and have them practice. Sooner or later, they'll start feeling that way more. And the more they feel that way, the more they'll believe in their future. And some people get so good at doing it that they walk around feeling that emotion, they feel like their future has already happened. And when you feel like the future has already happened, you stop looking for it. And that's when the magic starts to take place in people's lives. The synchronicities, the coincidences, the opportunities, they start coming to them in their life. And that's the reflection of their own personal change. Sometimes being in such severe lack and desperation, creates a state where you can't hear anything because no new information can enter the nervous system that is not equal to the emotion the person is experiencing. Just as a broad understanding, this is why we don't do questions in our events, because you can give the person the answer to the question that they're asking you, and they will not hear you. They will not hear you. In fact, they will argue against you. But if you get that person out of that emotional state, and the only person that's going to do that is them, by the way, get that person out of their emotional state, they can hear that information. So sometimes we're programmed into such lack, we're programmed, right, to wait for something out there to change, to take away this emptiness or lack. When this happens, I'll feel this, And so when things are good in our life, we feel good. And when things aren't so good in our life, we feel bad. So we're kind of victimized to the circumstances in our life. Our outer world is controlling our inner world of thoughts and feelings. So if a person has been programmed into saying, why haven't I healed? Or why hasn't this happened in my life? Because the person who's saying, why haven't I healed, is the old self. The new self would never say that, right? The new self is too busy overcoming and becoming, right? So I think people meet information at their own level. But what I can tell you that is so compelling and so exciting is that when we get people on the stage, and it happens every event, it's really quite unbelievable to see a person stand on the stage in front of 2,300 people. You would walk right past her in the grocery store. She doesn't look vegan. She doesn't look ketogenic. She doesn't look particularly fit or young or dressed well, whatever that is. She just looks like a normal person. And they stand on the stage and they tell their story of how they were diagnosed with cancer or whatever the condition is, and what they did in their life to change those health conditions. And there's numerous health conditions. When I look out in the audience and I look at people, there isn't a soul in the audience that isn't leaning in. Everybody is leaning in because there's the example of truth on the stage, and there's nothing like a good story, right? So the change that we're seeing in our community is that there's a greater acceptance, a greater belief, a greater understanding, a greater awareness to the idea that you could actually heal because people witness it. And the person in the audience who's seeing that person who healed themselves from whatever health condition it is relates to them. And they say, my God, if that person can do it, I can do it as well. And just like an infection spreads amongst a culture and creates disease, health and wellness can become as infectious as disease, right? And so it's not uncommon. Like when that person stands on the stage and they're the 4-minute mile. If the person has Raynaud's syndrome, we've had events where 4 other people with Raynaud's syndrome healed at the end of the event, like no longer have any symptoms at all. Or we've had 5 people in one event step out of a wheelchair. Now, if you asked me if I ever thought that was possible, I would say no. So I do think when a person sees that example of truth, their awareness of possibility begins to change. And the evidence then allows the person to increase their own belief in themselves and in possibility. Well, look, I think we're all a work in progress, right? I think it's an uncovering process. So I always tell people you can be anybody you want. You can be any character you want to be in 3-dimensional reality, in this kind of virtual reality experience. You get to put on any character. But when it comes time to create, When it comes time to connect, you got to lay down that character. You got to lay down the identity. You got to lay down that person, right? And some people have become so idealized to their identity that they can't be anything else. And so I don't think the identity is bad. I think as long as we're able to lay it down when we create, it's important. And by the same means, if there are aspects of your personality or your identity that is undermining your life in some way, and this happens to so many people we see, even with, when they're getting healings, that their blood values get better, and then they get back into their life, and then blood values go back up, and then they get more healings, and their blood values go down, and they go back into their life. And sooner or later, this goes on 4 or 5 times, they say, is it me? Like, do I have something to do with this? And the answer is always yes. If you want to take this on, you can't take one bite. You got to actually eat the whole thing. So then what aspect of your identity then is limiting you? And what is that story that you're saying to reaffirm it to be the truth? And is it really the truth? And if it's not the truth, then you got to make a decision. And you got to make a decision with such firm intention to change that belief, that the amplitude of that choice carries a level of energy that causes your body to respond to your mind. That the choice that you're making in that moment becomes a moment in time that you'll never forget. In other words, you have to say, I knew exactly where I was, what I was doing, what time of day it was when I made up my mind to change, right? It becomes a long-term memory. And the stronger the emotion you feel when you make that choice, the more you remember the choice, right? And so you can't say, oh, well, I think I'm going to change this kind of part of my identity. And your body's going to say, he's lying. Like, he's not serious. He's going to still make the same choice. When you say this is it, I don't care how long it takes, time. I don't care how I feel, body. I don't care what people think of me or what's going on in my life, environment. I'm going to change. And you come out of your resting state and you make that choice. You're giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. That's what you're doing. And so people who make up their mind to change, they have to come out of their resting state and they have to say that I'm doing this. And that is a strong signal in the field. So it's so important to assign meaning to the task or the act that we're engaging. And one of the best ways to do that is to hold that vision or the dream of why you're doing it. I want to be healthier. I want to be more fit. I want to be more wealthy. I want to be more free. I want to be more in love, whatever it is. The only thing that's stopping you from being any of those things is just a part of your identity that has to change so that you get there. And nothing's mystical about this. If you said, I want to be wealthy, this is your goal, this is your vision, and here you are in lack, the only way you're going to get wealthy is this person's going to have to change a lot to find that wealth, right? So there's nothing mystical about this. We've all done it at some point in our life where we just made up our mind. And what did we do when we did it? We got very clear, like, okay, let me remind myself what that vision is. I just got to remember, why am I doing this? Okay, so I'm going to have to make a different choice. Let me write down those choices I have to make. I'm going to have to start doing different things. Okay, what am I going to do? Let me remind myself what I need to do. Okay, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for this experience. Yeah, I know it might hurt my legs in the beginning or whatever it is. I know it may be a little uncomfortable, but I'm going for this goal. This is my goal. And the more we fascinate about that experience, the more we start feeling the emotion of that future. That's when your body, what we've discovered, is beginning to biologically change because it's starting to feel the emotion of the future ahead of time, right? So that keeps a person on the journey. And then we do something really great. We say, what thoughts do I want to stay away from? Like, I can't say, there's no way I'm going to say I can't feel like it. I mean, if you're truly committed to being healthy, and you're going to exercise, you can never say, I'm too tired. You can never say, I don't feel like it. That's going to cause you to not make the choice, right? So it's kind of this process where we're kind of doing that exact thing. We're actually looking at the old identity and we're reminding ourselves of who we want to become, right? And until you become it. And we discovered it's the overcoming process That is the becoming process. When the person overcomes some belief, some behavior, some emotion, when they truly overcome it, they naturally become somebody else. It's just a side effect. Their work in doing that makes them love themselves more. And many of these veterans, they cope to the best of their ability, but they, in the back of their mind, they have an exit plan. They have the drugs ready. They're thinking about taking their life. Many of them think this way, and they've done so many different types of things to help themselves, and even a lot of them have done plant medicine and mushrooms and ketamine and all kinds of things to help them. But on some level, their PTSD doesn't go away. And Joshua's a great example because he was at the very bottom of the point in his life where he was ready to give up. And, the thing that I like to do with veterans is to reason with them. If you have a Navy SEAL, right? And these are elite individuals. If I tell them exactly what will happen if they practice opening their heart, if I say to them it's going to reset the baseline for trauma in the brain, they don't say, "How do I do it?" They say, "Yes, sir. Like I'm going to do it until it happens." And that's what happens to all of these guys. There's so much trauma in their brain and body. There's so much incoherence in their nervous system. There's so many physical problems that they're having that they're just really out of balance. So if we work with these people and give them all the information and give them numerous opportunities to apply it, so many of them break through, and that's the moment their brain and body literally are no longer connected to the memory or the emotion that keeps them in the past, and they get recalibrated. Again, we interview a lot of these veterans. We interviewed this. He didn't know anything about meditation. This guy never meditated in his life. He didn't know anything about me. He didn't even know where he was going. This is how blind the study was. And he got there and he was just like, "There's no way, like, I'm going to hang out with all these people." He was really, and always on guard. And they asked him in front of the camera, like, "My goodness, like, what happened?" And this is a guy that looks like a Navy SEAL. And he paused for like a minute, and got so emotional. And he said, "I got my life back. I got my life back. I got my marriage is great again. I'm in love with my kids. I can feel again. I'm happy. Like, I'm not faking it. I really feel a change." So that's how the vet program kind of grew, because the veteran program was just a few vets coming that were, again, injured in some way, physically or emotionally, and completely different at the end of the event. They're going to go tell their tribe, like, right away, like, "You got to do this. This really helped me." So we have a strong veteran community, and we have our one of our nonprofits, the Give to Give Foundation, that works with veterans, and we create all kinds of programs for them to heal, and we're super proud of the results we're getting. Forgiveness to me is just overcoming the emotion. That's it. And like, if you overcome the emotion, the side effect of that is that your heart will open. That's exactly what happens. And when energy moves into the heart, we start releasing different chemicals than when we feel angry, or we feel victimized, or when we feel sexual. It's just a different chemical elixir. And oxytocin is released. And oxytocin signals nitric oxide. And nitric oxide signals another chemical that causes the arteries in your heart to literally dilate. The heart gets filled with energy. It's engorged with blood. And when that occurs, the oxytocin levels that you're feeling, the love that you're feeling, the studies show that when oxytocin levels are just elevated a little bit, it's really hard to hold a grudge. You just can't, right? So if you're willing to forgive and you overcome the emotion, you'll take your attention off the person or the problem, right? Because the stronger the emotion we have, the more we pay attention to our problems or the person, right? Overcome the emotion, you no longer have your attention on that person. And in a sense, you're taking energy and you're calling it back to you, right? So you're building your own field. And so love is the elixir that allows us to forgive. In other words, you can't say, "I'm going to forgive you. It's January 31st or February 1st, remember this day, we got a thing, I forgave you. That's not like forgiveness. When people really have that feeling of pure love, where they've actually gotten over the emotion, they've already forgiven. They're like, I'm totally cool. I'm great. You great? I'm great. Like, so it's a side effect of a change, because if the stronger the emotion we feel, the more we pay attention to that person. Where we place our attention is where we place our energy. Okay, overcome the emotion, you no longer have your attention on that person, you're calling energy back to you and you're building your own field. And there's energy now to heal. There's energy now to create. There's energy now for the mystical experience. And so you can't do that if you're feeling frustrated, or if you're feeling anger, if you're feeling resentment. You'll always hold the grudge. You have to convert. You have to teach a person how to get into that elevated state. And the side effect of that is forgiveness. It's not something that you have to do. It's just something that automatically happens. The only way you're going to free yourself from that person or from that past experience is for you to literally overcome the emotion. So, God, we've all had people do really horrible things, and we've probably done some horrible things to people as well. But I don't think you can free yourself or free them unless you decide that, love is going to be the thing that heals it. And God, so many people do it in our work. And the side effect of it is that they have wonderful effects in their lives, many times just healing. And, so living in stress is living in survival. The problem with the stress hormones is that the arousal that's created from the stress hormones causes us to move into these higher brainwave states called beta brainwave states. We're aroused, and the arousal causes us to pay attention primarily to all the things in our outer world. The arousal causes us to put our attention on our body. It causes us to obsess and think about time. And so people get stuck in these high brainwave states. And I think the big challenge is if you understand that stress is when you're knocked out of homeostasis, when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, then your response or your reaction to people or circumstances in your life that you're chronically feeling on a regular basis is actually weakening the organism. Because when you turn on that emergency system, the fight or flight nervous system, because of the hormones of stress, and you move your body out of balance and it has no time to recover and turn back to balance, now you're headed for disease, because no organism can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. The arousal creates a rush of energy, and people become addicted to the stress hormones. They become addicted to those emotions. And so that now they need the people and the conditions and the circumstances in their life to reaffirm their addiction to the emotion. They need the bad job. They need the bad relationship. They need the traffic. They need the news, just so that they can stay in that emotional state. So then 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a healthcare facility in the Western world walks in because of emotional or psychological stress. That's the number one thing. So our emotional response to the conditions in our life then becomes the important element. So people think, oh my God, when I'm emotional, I can't control my emotions. And turns out you can regulate. It turns out you can shorten the response period from emotions, and it takes practice, right? So you could have the most ketogenic, vegan, organic, peptide, whatever, intermittent fasting diet, and you could do yoga, and you can do cardio, and you can do HIIT training, and foundation training, and whatever. Get massage, acupuncture. But if you're an emotional wreck, and you can't, if there's three types of stress, physical, chemical, and emotional, then there's three types of balance, physical, chemical, and emotional. If you got your body in physical balance and chemical balance, and you're not putting it in emotional balance, these will never stay. Mm-hmm. So then the important element then is teaching people how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional responses and catch themselves when they're feeling those emotions and change it, and not rely on anything outside of them to do it, a video game or a drug or whatever people do. Teach them that they have the tools to do it themselves. And if they understand that they're addicted to those emotions, I've seen this thousands of times. There's always an aha moment, like, I'm addicted to anger? Like, really? Oh my God, maybe I am. Now, the moment you recognize that, oh my God, I'm using that person to reaffirm my addiction to anger. Oh my God, like I don't want to feel anger. Okay, well, an addiction is something that you think you can't stop. Addiction is doing something that you know isn't good for you and you're doing it anyway, right? So if these emotions are addictive, then I'm going to probably go through withdrawals. I've probably overdosed a few times. I've probably had a couple bad trips. Okay, so let me get really clear, like how am I going to change this? So if the change is to be greater than your body, your environment, and time, and when you live in stress and you live in survival, all your attention is on your body, your environment, and time, it means that when we're living in stress, it's really hard to change because it's not a time to change. It's time to run, fight, and hide, right? So teaching people how to break those emotional addictions is the side effect of that is called joy. A person is no longer tormenting their body and keeping it out of balance. And many people who heal in this work, they don't say, "Oh, I'm gonna heal this health condition." They'll say, "The first thing I'm gonna do," and this is the majority of them, is I'm gonna work on getting my body back into homeostasis. Like I'm gonna work on regulating my emotional states. I'm not gonna react in this way. I'm not gonna respond this way. That's the work right there. Is breaking those emotional addictions so that we can move out of survival. And in survival, it's not a time to create. In survival, it's not a time to meditate. It's not a time to close your eyes and go within. You'd be eaten. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to open your heart, right? And yet we got to work with our bodies and be able to recondition them to a new mind. And so a lot of the work that we do, especially during this time in history, where everybody's feeling the pressure, the environmental pressure of stress, is to give people the tools to be able to self-regulate. And when I mean self-regulate, that means move from one emotional state to another emotional state. And it's not bad that we react. We all react. I react. But the question is, how long? Like, how long are you going to react for? Because if you keep doing it for months or years, it ultimately becomes your personality, right? We did a study where we had people stop feeling survival emotions for 3 days and have them practice feeling elevated emotions, heart-centered emotions. We measured a chemical called IgA, immunoglobulin A. It's your body's natural flu shot. It's actually better than a flu shot. And so we measured people's IgA levels at the beginning of this time, and then we measured them at the end. At the end of 3 days, by trading those limited emotions for more elevated emotions, their IgA levels went up 50%. 50%. So when you're feeling an elevated emotion, the body's so objective that it's believing it's living in a nurturing and loving environment. And if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, that person is signaling genes ahead of the environment. And now the body's going to make globulins, which are proteins that are going to create more internal defense and less attention on external defense. So the immune system then, which is the internal protection system, begins to move back into order. If you can set aside a certain amount of time for yourself, just for yourself, to be alone with yourself. And for me, my routine is to have 2 hours in the morning. That's just my time. Like, that's my time where I'm going to get my brain and body right. It's a time where I'm going to think about the things I have to do in the day and how I'm going to be in my day. I get that all clear, and then I do my meditation. And my meditation is really for me to overcome myself and change and then create. And I don't care if you do it in the morning or in the evening. I'm a morning person. I've always been a morning person. I have friends that are artists and musicians, and even my kids, they're just more evening people. They're creative, so they like the evening. It doesn't matter to me. I just pick a time in your day where you can think about who you want to be and who you no longer want to be, and think about what you're going to change, and always make a little room for the unknown, which is the fun part, and get creative. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I'm proud of in our community. I'm really proud of the fact that people do the work. Like, everybody does the work. It's not like I have to make them do it. And when I ask them, why do you do it every day? Aside from the majority of saying it makes me feel better, they typically say, I don't want the magic to end. Like, there's too many good things going on in my life. Like, I want to keep doing this. It's working for me. So it's kind of not like a have to, it's a want to. So we were so fascinated. This was February of 2020. I'll never forget it. We started when we were doing our electroencephalograms, our brain studies. We put a cardiac lead from the heart to the machine, and we started looking at HRV in comparison to brainwaves. And coherence is rhythm, right? So when waves are kind of moving in rhythm like this, you can see that on the brain scan, right? They're they're rhythmic like that. So if you think of waves that are coherent, being very orderly and being very rhythmic, when they're out of order, like choppy, and they're on different parts of the brain or on different rhythms, that's when the brain's incoherent, right? And so when we started looking at training people how to broaden their awareness to sense space, when you're sensing space, the act of sensing and feeling causes you to stop analyzing and thinking. And if you're not analyzing and thinking, you start suppressing neocortical activity. Your brainwaves start to slow down. In beta, you're aware that you're a body local in space and time. That's low-level beta. Like we're talking right now, we're in low-level beta. If I said, Stephen, I'm going to give you a quiz, and you're going to have to take the quiz in front of your audience, and you would kind of perk up a little bit. Your brain would get a little bit more aroused, and the light bulb would get a little brighter, and you'd move into mid-range beta. That's like when you're going to give a speech, or you're at a dinner and you don't know people. You kind of be a little bit more aware. So beta is conscious awareness. Now, in beta, the brain is trying to create meaning between what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the inner world, and it's processing all the sensory information. So a lot of data. So beta is like conscious and awake. And so there's low-level beta, there's mid-range beta. It's not on this chart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. People get switched on in these high levels of beta, and that's when we get over-focused. That's because you're narrowing your focus and you're over-focusing, and that's kind of a brain state. And so when you broaden your awareness and you, instead of narrow your focus on something physical or material, that's what the stress hormones do. But if you broaden your awareness and you sense space, and this act of sensing causes you to no longer analyze and think, and your brainwaves start to move into alpha. Now, in alpha, which is this brainwave, it's a slower brainwave state. That's the creative state of the brain. The brain sees more in pictures, more in images. It's more imaginary, right? In beta, there's a voice talking to you in the back of your head all the time saying, this is right and this is wrong. You got this to do, you got that to do. That's the critic kind of in our brain. When you get beyond beta brainwaves and you move into alpha, you start opening the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, we're not just looking for any type of alpha, but we're looking for coherent alpha. So we want all those compartments that were firing in different rhythms and different frequencies, all of a sudden start doing this. So now the whole entire brain starts moving into what's called global coherence. Now, when the brain starts synchronizing like that, what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain, and the whole brain starts to fire as one neurological network, and that's what our data shows. Now, that's not the end. That's just when you're moving into an imaginary state. And people do this, but a lot of people move into alpha, but it's not coherent. So we're looking for coherent alpha. Now, many of the people that are meditating really well, they can relax their body so well, and they can feel so safe that their body moves into a light rest or a light sleep while they're still awake. So it's relaxed and awake. In that realm, you're in a hypnotic state. You're in theta brainwaves. And in theta now, lights are shut out in the thinking neocortex that plugs us into three-dimensional reality. The identity's gone. The character is gone. There's no activity there. Now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information, and now we're suggestible to information. And now we're in the operating system. We can get in the subconscious mind and rewrite a program. We could rehearse a new script. We can tell a new story. Instead of the story of the past, we could tell the story of our future, and we can program our subconscious mind and our autonomic nervous system to begin to change our biology. Now, go too far past theta and you fall into delta, and now lights are out. You're in a catatonic state, and you're unconscious, right? And so we kind of do this when we go to bed at night. We go from beta to alpha to theta to delta. And if you're under stress and you're in high beta, you can't sleep. And you can't sleep because you're thinking, right? And you can't drop through brainwaves. And we wake up in the morning and go from delta to theta to alpha to beta, right? So there's 2 times that the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens up. Okay, what does this have to do with brain and heart coherence? Well, in theta, when a person is in that state where their attention is on their heart and energy is in their heart, it's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center, right? It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create. So you get the heart and the brain kind of working together. The more relaxed you get in your heart, the more awake you get in the brain, something beautiful happens in the brain. If the person can sustain this and they're in that theta state, theta becomes the carrier wave. And right within the brain, you start to see alpha waves building on theta waves, and then alpha waves in harmonics into beta waves, and harmonics into high beta, and then high beta ultimately into gamma. And now the person is relaxed and very awake because gamma is super consciousness. It is super awareness. So the formula of being relaxed and awake and synchronizing your heart to your brain causes the brain to move into a state of what's called resonance. And resonance is when you have waves on top of waves, harmonics. And the brain starts functioning in a more resonant state. Sometimes even people have delta as the base, carrying theta, and theta carrying alpha, and alpha carrying beta to high beta to gamma. And they're all waves within waves. And as those waves come together, if they're coherent, they interfere and create a bigger wave. And then those waves come together and they interfere and they create bigger waves. And that's exactly how the energy in the brain goes up. So we have brain scans of people whose gamma brain waves are 200, 300, 400 standard deviations outside of normal. And I'm going to give you an idea. 3 standard deviations outside of normal is 2% of the population. So they're processing an enormous amount of energy in their brain. And it feels really good, really good. So we practice a lot synchronizing the heart to the brain. When you're conscious in your subconscious mind, and you're trained to imagine whatever it is that you want, you're going to begin to signal your autonomic nervous system to start manufacturing chemicals equal to your intention. In other words, the intention of whatever you're thinking about acts as information that begins to change your biology. So theta is a great way to open up the door. We also use theta when we want to program people, because it's a hypnotic state, to a mystical experience. And if they're in that state, remember, when you're suggestible, you accept, believe, and surrender to information as if it's the truth without analyzing it. And that's what programs people's biology, right? So you can program somebody into believing they need a drug, and you can program somebody into believing in just about anything, but you could also program them for a mystical experience, and that's what we do. So we can do that by giving them information when they're in that hypnotic state. They're very suggestible, but we're only going to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And then the third way is something that we really discovered that we weren't expecting. Let's see how I can say this and make it simple. There's particle and wave. There's matter and energy. And so if all of your attention is on this three-dimensional world, you're unaware of energy. So have a person close their eyes and take their attention off of everything physical, everything material, everything known, and go from a narrow focus to a broadened focus. And as they sense the space, they're actually putting their attention on that invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses, the quantum field, right? And that field is carrying an enormous amount of information. So when a person moves into theta, and I ask them to open their awareness, if they're in a certain range of theta, we can just about predict 100% of the time that that person is going to connect to information. Now, not information coming from their senses, like a hypnotist could put you in a trance in theta and give you suggestions, and it could program you. But you're still in the same state, that hypnotic state, but your eyes are closed. There's music playing in the background. You're not eating, you're not tasting, you're not smelling, you're not feeling with your body, but you're still suggestible to information. There's only one other place you can find information, and that's frequency. And frequency carries information. So when a person starts to connect to energy, to frequency, and the thinking neocortex is dialed down, the moment they connect to that energy and frequency, the brain goes into these very, very high states of gamma brainwave patterns. They're connecting to a greater level of energy, a greater level of order, and the arousal that's felt when they have this connection, which is normally typically fear or anger or pain, the arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. They say, I don't have the words to describe the feeling that I just had, right? So they're dipping closer to source, and they're dipping closer to a greater energy and frequency, and it's being reflected in their biology. When we see people move into these elegant states of high gamma, it's primarily in their autonomic nervous system. It's very fast, and it's very coherent. Now, if stress is autonomic dysregulation, and they're functioning in a very, very high energetic state in their autonomic nervous system, coherent gamma brainwaves, then there's an enormous amount of autonomic regulation. And the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems. Now watch out, because now the tuning fork is sending information to every cell and tissue and organ in the body. And when people move into these states, many times when they come back, they get a biological upgrade. Somehow energy starts to inform matter, and the whole body is lifted by light, lifted by frequency. Those people that have those transcendental moments, as I said, 84% of them have information in their blood that causes the mitochondrial function and glycolytic function in cancer cells to shut off. There's information in the blood for neurogenesis, for the microbiome completely changed at the end of 7 days, completely different microbiome, without changing their diet at all. They're still eating the same food, but they're not the same person, right? There's some kind of change that creates a lot of probiotic microbes. Many people that come to our week-long retreats, Stephen, they're novices. They've never really meditated before. Their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend brought them, or their coworker or their friend, or they're just kind of like, whatever. I don't really know what I'm getting myself into. The novice meditator who just kind of practices a little bit, that goes through the immersive experience, at the end of 7 days, their brains look like advanced meditators. At the end of 7 days, their biology, their blood values look like they've been meditating for years. In other words, at the end of 7 days, those those meditators that were novice meditators that look like advanced meditators are upregulating thousands of genes in their biology to suggest that they're living in a whole new life, a whole new environment, and they're in a ballroom. And there's nothing very stimulating about a ballroom. So whatever they're doing inside of themselves, somehow is causing dramatic changes. Now, we looked at a group of people. We looked at their genotype, and genes make proteins. And your gene expression is different than mine, and different than every single person. So everybody has their own unique genotype, which means they all make their own individual proteins. At the end of 7 days, when we looked at those meditators, at the end of 7 days, almost 80% of the population was making the same genes and the same proteins. They were signaling the same genes and making the same proteins. What does that mean? That means when people behave in the same way, there's an emergent consciousness that comes forth that's reflected in people's biology, the flock, the herd, the tribe. Everybody's evolving together biologically. Well, that's what I want. I want people to walk out into their life and not say, you need to shorten the refractory period of your emotional responses, you need to forgive, and you need to get your brain or heart coherent. I don't want anybody in my work to do that. I want them to walk out into the world and be the example. So much so that people go, what's up with you? You're different. Like you seem different. What is it? And that's when I think the real conversation starts. So It's instrumental. When it becomes instrumental and you apply it to your life and it's working for you, it's not a have to. As I said, it's something that you really enjoy doing. And wow, what a crazy sovereign idea that you could actually make yourself happy. What a crazy idea when you hit those gamma moments where you feel a level of love that you have never felt in your entire life by connecting to source, which is pure love. And you stop looking for it outside of you. You start realizing it's within you. That's a big moment, right? Because then you won't need anybody or anything. That's freedom. That's unconditional love, right? Like we've been trained to create based on lack. That's what we do in three-dimensional reality. In three-dimensional reality, you see someone that has a sports car and you don't have one, and you like that sports car. All of a sudden, you want that sports car. Your brain starts creating based on lack of not having it. You see someone in a scarf and you like that scarf, and next thing you know, you're wearing that scarf. Your brain imagines you having it, right? But the way we get it in three-dimensional reality is we have to do something. This is the plane of demonstration. So then when we finally get the scarf and we finally get the car, the experience of getting the car produces the emotion that takes away the lack or separation of not having it. So some people spend their whole life in lack, waiting for the thing to come around to take away the feeling of lack or separation, right? My message is not that. My message is actually to create in a different way, in such a way that you feel like it has already happened. Now, the power behind all of that is that the person now who's in that state where they're feeling like the event has already happened, they no longer want it because they're feeling the emotion of it. How could they wouldn't be looking for it. You only look for it when you experience lack. If you feel like it's already happened, you're no longer separate from it. And we cannot attract anything in our life we feel separate from. And so feeling that emotion somehow starts to draw things to us. And now we're not having to do anything. And things are starting to come to us. That's the synchronicities. That's the coincidences. That's the opportunities. We're not doing anything. They're coming to us. And that's so you can't, when you create from that quantum field instead of from matter, you can't create from lack because the thought of your wealth in the quantum produces the feeling of abundance. The thought of your wealth in three-dimensional reality for many people produces the lack of not having it. So in the quantum, there's a whole different set of rules, and it's not something that you learn right away. You learn from trial and error. So then when we truly create in the act of creation, and we are creating from the field instead of from matter, to shorten the distance between the thought of what we want and experience of having it. The only way that we can do that is we can't create from lack. So in the creative process, we create from wholeness. I always tell people, I don't care what you want to create. I just want you to get really good at creating. I don't care what it is. Well, I don't care what it is. Cars, whatever it is, vacations, houses, I don't care. Just get good at creating. But sooner or later that the novelty will wear off on all of that. And you'll want to know that on some level there's more. So we always desire things. We always want things. But when we're in the creative process, we cannot create from the lack of not having it. We have to create from the feeling of having it, right? And so in the quantum, you got to feel it to experience it. The probability that we're perceiving the truth of reality is zero. That there's more information in the immaterial than there'll ever be in the material. And that information that exists in the immaterial that the senses cannot perceive. The senses can only perceive three-dimensional reality, objects and things and places and people and bodies. There's an invisible field of energy. The atom is both particle, matter, and wave or energy, right? But all we see is the material element. And the atom is 99.99999% information and energy, and 0.0000001% matter. So the brain has been shaped and molded from generations untold in living in survival by narrowing our focus on the material world. The stress hormones heighten our senses. And when our senses are heightened, we become materialists. So live in survival for thousands and thousands of years. Energy is not important when you're being chased by T-Rex. Energy is not important when you're looking for food, right? You got to narrow your focus. And And so the brain cannot perceive energy or frequency. So what we're seeing is really symbols or just out picturing of the most stable form of energy called matter. And our senses collapse it into what appears to be material. But the quantum field is that other field of energy and information that exists beyond our senses, beyond this material world, whose signature is oneness, whose signature is wholeness, whose signature is connection, whose signature is love, pure love. And so if you spend your whole life with all of your attention on your body, your environment, and time, all of your attention is in this three-dimensional reality, then you got to play by the rules. And the rules are Newtonian physics. You got to predict everything. It's going to take time and energy for you to get everything you want in your life. Okay, you can get really good at that. You can get really good. You can get skilled. You can get trained. You can get coached. You can learn. You can go to school. You can learn from your mistakes. You can gather a lot of things. You can get really good at that. But is there another way to create? Okay, well, Einstein said the field, the wave, the energy is the sole governing agency of the particle. Energy controls matter. He didn't say the particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. If you change the information in the field, can you change the projection, the particle in three-dimensional reality? This is a holographic universe, okay? So if the quantum field is an invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses, beyond our body, our environment, and time, then the only way we are going to connect to it is take all of our attention off our body, all of our attention off the environment. What's the environment made of? People, objects, things, places, and take all of your attention off of linear time, the predictable future and the familiar past, and find the sweet spot of the generous present moment. That's the unknown. That's the door. That's the moment you become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, no time. That is the moment you are pure consciousness. And it's no different than me saying to you, stay alive. I'm going to take away your eyesight. I'm going to take away your hearing. I'm going to take away your smell. I'm going to take away your taste. I'm going to take away you feeling with your body. And if I take away all of your senses, who are you? Your consciousness, right? Your consciousness. Consciousness of what? Nothing. Nothing but what? You. And the act of becoming conscious of nothing and becoming nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time is the eye of the needle. And that is the moment you're walking through the door to the quantum field. And when you walk through that door, the game changes. It's all energy. It's all frequency. It's all vibration. It's all connected. It's all thought. It's all consciousness. It's all information, right? And so you got to train your brain like when you pass through, you're not you any longer. You're not your body any longer. You're your body here. You're pure consciousness. And that void or that vacuum or that nothing, whatever you want to call that, is rich in frequency and energy. So have people linger there without a name, without a skin color, without a gender, without a diet, without a face, without a past, without a social security number, without a profession, without being a mother, a father, a kid. Linger there as pure consciousness. Lay the character down and get comfortable in nothing, in the unknown. Okay, now that you're there, if it's all frequency and it's all energy, then the next thing we have to do then is get our brain coherent, because thought is the electrical charge, it's the impulse in the quantum field. And the feeling, the elevated emotion, is the magnetic charge. If you take a thought and a feeling, an image and an emotion, a vision of the future with a coherent brain and a coherent heart, you got a whole new Wi-Fi signal. Now you're broadcasting new information into the field and you're connected to this field. Keep changing the information in the field, you're going to change the destiny of your experience in matter. And so we teach people how to get to that place, get their brains and hearts coherent, and learn how to create by changing the information in the field to ultimately create the experience they want in three-dimensional reality. And when there's a vibrational match between their energy and some potential in the quantum field, and they're creating from the source of everything physical, why would they go anywhere to get it? If you're the source, you would draw it to you. So then creating from the field instead of from matter can literally shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it. Instead of going and having to do something to get it, it starts coming to you. And that's another way to create. The overcoming process, the first couple of days, is more valuable than all the gold in the world for people. They'll say, oh my God, I had such a terrible story. I had such a belief. Oh my God, I was so addicted to those emotions. They'll tell you. And you just have to sit with yourself long enough to no longer want to feel that way. And we just give people the tools to get them from the old self to the new self to cross that river. We'll take the idea like this. If you were angry right now, or you were feeling sad, and I came up to you and I said, hey, Stephen, listen, I know you're really miffed right now. I know you're feeling really down, whatever. But just stop. Just stop being there. Just stop. If you can't stop that, then on some level you must be addicted to it, right? If you truly were not addicted to it, you would be able to just turn it off, right? So when people start to see that, they're like, oh my God, yeah, I could be addicted to that. It's a good moment for people. Well, the long-term effects of doing that, I mean, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. Mm-hmm. You could think about your problems and you could produce the same chemistry as if it was real. The long-term effects of the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease. And if you can turn on that stress response just by thought alone, that means your thoughts can make you sick. So again, here we go, trial and error. You got to catch yourself, and you got to go, because when you're feeling sad, as an example, or you're feeling angry or whatever, for the most part, you want to stay there. Many people, like, it's just comfortable. It's some people find a lot of comfort in being unhappy. They're really happy being unhappy. So if you want to evolve your experience in life, you would say, I can change this. I literally can change it. Let me sit down and change my emotional state. If this emotion is causing me to view my reality through the lens of the past, if this reality is downregulating my genes and creating disease, if this reality, feeling this emotion, is causing me to behave as if I'm in a past reality, if feeling this emotion causes me to believe in my past more than my future, maybe it's not such a good idea that I stay there. So justified or not, valid or not, the only person that emotion is affecting is you. Sooner or later, I think when people start realizing I can change my emotional state and they really sit down, even though they don't want to do it, they do it, that's when they start feeling a lot of worth. Our data shows that the autonomic nervous system can manufacture a pharmacy of chemicals that works better than any drug. A drug trial is about 25% effective. 1 out of 4 people have a response, and it's normally over a length of time, 60 to 90 days. What our data shows is that 75, as I said, 84, 90, 95, 100% of the people that are involved in a 7-day event have these effects. So even if it's 75%, that means it's working 3 times better than any drug. And yet your nervous system is manufacturing those chemicals equal to the person's state of being, equal to their intention. And I keep asking the scientists, where are those chemicals coming from? The person's not eating a pill. They're not changing their diet. They're not doing anything. And yet what wasn't there before the event somehow is there after the event. It's coming from within us. And that's what I believe. And I think it's really important for people to make time for it, to connect to it, to fall in love with it, to stay aware of it, to bring it into their life by staying aware of it and connecting to it. And I think the more we interact with it, I think the more it becomes us and the more we become it. And so removing the veils, the blocks, the emotions, the habits, the blind spots that stand in our way between our connection to that unifying field or God or the absolute or the creator or universal mind or source or singularity, the 0 point field, the fertile void, whatever you want to call it, the mother-father principle, making time to interact with it by removing the things that stand in the way between us and it allows us to get closer to love, right? And I think that's what God is. So the expression of the divine, the expression of God through the human being would be a person that's more conscious, more mindful, more willful, more loving, more giving. That's the nature of the divine. So its nature becomes our nature, right? So I do believe that we're not linear beings living a linear life. I believe that we're dimensional beings living a dimensional life. And I do believe in that universal mind, that universal power, and making time to use it and to interact with it and connect with it and to reach for it and to become it. I think it's a worthy journey for people.